Okay, so today's presentation is on creation stories of ancient civilizations. So what we're going to do is not only go into the ancient past and just explore ancient civilizations, but also talk about why I chose this topic in the first place. And I've done a few presentations before, and some of you may have seen it. And I do have a couple of free presentations actually on YouTube, on the Portal to Ascension YouTube, on sound frequency and ancient civilizations, sound frequency and how it relates to quantum physics, and sound frequency and how it relates to future applications. So within that presentation of the ancient civilizations, I spent some time actually exploring creation stories and creation stories in relation to sound and vibration, and also the term and the concept of darkness. So when I was looking in sound and vibration, I realized there were hundreds of these stories all over the world that have the same kind of beginning to it when they talk about the universe or creation being spoken or vibrated into existence, some sort of sound, even when it comes to the conventional wisdom of the origin of the universe. Let's talk about mainstream science. What does mainstream science say? They say there was a big bang. What is the big bang? They are literally using a sound, big bang, big explosion, to explain the creation and the birth of the universe. So before we get into the story, we're going to do some foundational information here. First of all, who am I? I was born in London, UK. I was raised as a Hindu my entire life, but when I was around 12 years old, I moved to California. And, you know, even though I was raised Hindu, I never really firmly believed everything that I was being told. I just did what I was supposed to do. And what I realized is many, like, I guess, first generation outside of India, Indian kids that are born, many of them actually just do the rites and rituals, but don't have a firm religious belief, like, you know, many of people that come straight from India, our parents, our grandparents, how devout they are and how much they rely on like blind faith to follow their religion. So I really didn't have that concept of blind faith. I just did what I was told. However, when I got until maybe 18 years old, when I was graduating high school, going into college, I started experimenting with not only different types of music, meeting different people, but also experimenting with psychedelic plant medicines, such as mushrooms, did a lot of mushrooms. And while I was doing that, I was also researching and trying to find out what the root of all of this information was. Like, I was raised Hindu, but I really didn't believe it. So what is the truth of it all? And is there any truth at all into the religious scriptures? So I started going down the path of ancient history. I came across, maybe in 2001, 2002, videos by Nassim Haramein. I'm sure many of you know who he is. Jim Self, and who talks about sacred geometry and quantum Merkaba manifestation. And then Jordan Maxwell, who talks about the occult, the Sumerians, and the Anunnaki, and also the sons of God, which were the second tier of gods with the Anunnaki. So as I was getting into this information, I went like deep down the rabbit hole on studying the ancient Sumerian tablets, reading as much of that as I could, also reading the Quran, reading the parts of the Torah, reading the Bible. And I was finding that there was all these connections and similarities, that many of these religions were talking about the same exact things. And some of the stories were the exact same stories that were in one scripture, just taken with different characters and put into another one. So that kind of sparked my curiosity. If we can track back origin stories, and not even just origin stories, but scriptures in general from all these ancient civilizations, then where do we come from? Are they connected? Did one come from another? And how can I explore that? So through that exploration, through that piece of information in my head, is literally why Portal to Ascension was created. What I do now, 1,000+ events, event a week, 110 events a month, 80% of them online, 20% live conferences, tours, retreats. All of that came from me wanting to know the root of all these cultures and civilizations. So fast forward to 2006, 2008, I've been into this stuff for 6 to 8 years now. That's when I had the dream and the realization to create Portal to Ascension, created the group, and slowly but surely we started growing in momentum. We had many thousands of people start joining our platforms online. And then eventually around, 2008? So that's it's 2021 right now. So 12 to 13 years ago is when I created my first event. And now we're a full-on conscious event production company. So that's kind of a little bit of history on, how I got to where I am. But part of what I was discovering, I talked about the ancient Sumerians. Many of the ancient Sumerian information started connecting me back to Hinduism because there were a lot of similarities. They were talking about vibration and frequency. There was information on quantum physics. They were talking about snakes, and in the Hindu text there were snakes. So I was drawing all these connections and started delving into what we call prehistory or alternative history. Prehistory is the history that is basically before everything that we've written and been teaching to you in school, all the books that have been created, all the history of what they say the conventional timeline of humanity is. And alternative archaeology are all these new discoveries that have come, not even new, but some of them have been around forever. We've just mistaken as something else. But all these archaeological discoveries that kind of throws the conventional timeline of what we're told history is on its head. So just to go a little deeper into alternative archaeology, what is it? It's historical records and discoveries that go against the conventional timeline of what we've been taught. That's pretty much the basis of it all. So forbidden archaeology, which is basically the same thing, is there are certain things, like, for example, the existence of giants. I'm sure you've heard about the Titans. I'm sure you heard about the Nephilim and the giants in the Bible, right?
Right.
So with this forbidden archaeology, there seems to be an existence of giants that we've actually discovered. Many skeletal remains have been discovered of these giants, and it's kind of been swept under the rug. In the museum in Ecuador, the main centerpiece is actually a giant that's over 20 foot tall, a skeletal remains. It's there hidden in plain sight, but in South America, they just accept it as normality, and they don't have the need to go around and tell the world of it all. We just aren't kind of shown that or even taught that. So also forbidden archaeology says modern Homo sapiens existed around for 200,000 years. So Homo sapiens, the species that you and I are, we've been around for around 200,000 years. That's what they're saying. But forbidden archaeology is now discovering that the same kind of DNA structure, the same stature and body type and species, Homo sapiens, has actually existed longer than 200,000 years, and skeletal remains have been found now. But what happens is that if anything comes that kind of throws conventional archaeology on its back, what happens is it's thrown under the rug. If there's not enough evidence in forbidden archaeology to completely throw the conventional timeline, out and make it go mainstream, it's pretty much just swept under the rug, so we can just stick to what we've been taught, whether that's deliberate and intentional because they want to stop us from knowing our history, or whether it's more academic now and people are kind of fearful to be ridiculed within the archaeological and geological community, so they just stick to the conventional timeline rather than lose their careers. I think it's kind of a combination of both. So we have been the only Homo sapiens. So forbidden archaeology also states that we've been the only, conventional archaeology states we have been the only Homo sapien species on Earth for the last 40,000 years. So check this out. Not only are they saying that even within their own timeline, they're telling us something here. Not only are we being told that, Homo sapiens like us have only been on Earth by ourselves for 40,000 years, but also the 160,000 years before that we're told that we started out, there were other Homo species existing with us, other humanoids. So, and that's just what they're saying. So now say that within our community, we're saying, okay, the timeline goes beyond 200,000 years. Homo sapiens have been here for much longer. Then that just means that there were other species coexisting with us for much longer than that. And if that's the case, doesn't that spark curiosity? Were they as intelligent as us? Were they more advanced than us? Were we able to communicate? Because obviously we know we were able to interbreed with a few of them, because we have Neanderthal DNA and we have DNA of Denisovans, which were another form of humanoids that weren't Homo sapiens. So cross-species interbreeding, we have, right, what I say right here, we have definite DNA of those two species and a few other ones that coexisted with us. And the share screen thing is kind of taken up this area, so I can't read it. But if you can read at the bottom, I'm not going to try to say those words, but I'll say the first one: Homo floresiensis and Homo naledi. These are all different Homo sapiens that we know, that we have proven existed on Earth within the last 200,000 years with us. So that's just what we've been told. Imagine how many of them were completely wiped off the face of the Earth, how many of them we have no evidence for. So 7 minimum we existed with throughout our history. So now, why did I choose creation stories? It's kind of a unique approach within this community of disclosure, ancient history, and all of that. But the real reason I chose creation story is that all cultures and sentient civilizations since the dawn of time, had some sort of origin story of how they came about. Even our ancestors that did not even have written or spoken language, they drew images of how they came about onto this planet. So doesn't that make you wonder, what did they know and what did they think? There's been so many cultures that have been completely wiped from existence. So the reason why I chose creation stories, the main reason, is that there have been so many cultures that we've completely forgotten about. Some of them that we can do a simple Google search and then be reminded of because it's just not spoken about. Not that many people know them. Maybe less than 1% of the planet even knows who they are or who they were or their culture. But then just imagine the ones that haven't been put on the internet, that were wiped out, that nobody even discovered, and there were no texts for. So if there were so many, our story of ancient humanity, of an ancestry, goes so deep and it's so far back and is so beautiful and intricate that it just makes me curious to know what they thought about how they ended up on this planet in the first place. So as I say here, this made me curious. Who were they? What information did they hold? And how are we connected? Was there any information in these creation stories of how we're actually connected to each other? So we have just some of the vanished civilizations. Let me give you an example, because not only, as I said, there are ones that you can search for, and I'll show you some of them in a moment here that you can search for, and you can find, many, many different cultures that have completely vanished. But think about the ones that are in our alternative or forbidden archaeology. When we talk about Atlantis, many people, majority of the world think Atlantis is a myth. It's only coming to light now that it did exist. And Lemuria dated back even further than Atlantis. Göbekli Tepe, around 13,000 years ago, 10 to 13,000 years ago, it was in its heyday and being utilized, and it was an advanced structure. Ancient sites older than we've been told. So not only these ones that have completely been wiped out, but also ancient sites that we've found that we've been given the wrong timeline for. For example, Egypt. Pre-dynastic Egypt, we're told, is around 3000 BC, but the geological evidence suggests that pre-dynastic Egypt was definitely in existence around 13,000 years ago, 11,700 BC. And we'll go into that a little bit more in just a second. So then the Indus Valley, vanished. Easter Island, where did all those people go, right? And something even more recent in North America, the Cahokia tribe. So all these vanished civilizations, what were their stories? The Native American story is kind of the route of why I chose to come into all of this, because I really feel for the natives of North America and in general everywhere, but maybe because I live here and it was only a few hundred years ago and the oppression is still going on. When I look at how many tribes and civilizations existed here, first of all, we're told how many people were here by the people that conquered them. So chances are, and they gave a pretty high number, it was at least 1 million. So if it was more than that, 1 million or more even, just the story of how they were separated, the kids were taken from them, the kids were taken to education camps where they had to serve white families, and the family was broken up, and then some of them were completely wiped out by disease. No one even knows who they are, and then other of them were conquered and killed. So, and we're living on their land right now, and that was extremely recent. So native tribes from all over the world, and most notable in the Americas, have been eradicated from existence and some completely forgotten. There are around 562 federally recognized indigenous tribes, but there have been many, many more. Scholarly estimates of the pre-Columbian population of North America have differed by millions of individuals. The lowest is around 900,000 people, and the highest point, the estimate is there could have been around 900,000 people, yes. And 18 million people is on the high point, So they're saying that in North America, Mexico and above, basically 18 million people could have been here. How many people are left now? There's also, and you can find this with a simple Wikipedia search, where it gives you the list of all this. There's a minimum of 590 unrecognized native tribes in North America. So not only is there 562 federally recognized one, there's over the same, there's more than that amount of unrecognized native tribes, 590. So there's a lot of information and wisdom that has been lost to time. Here are some lost North American tribes. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's just a little list. And I kind of just wanted to like just leave it there just to give these guys like a moment in the light, you know? And then we go into lost native languages. This is just in Canada and the United States. So all these languages existed here within the last few hundred years, and now they're completely gone. And this is only a few hundred years ago. You know, like we're not even talking 1,000, 2,000, 13,000 years ago.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? So what is the shared human story? That's the question from all of this. Like, what is the shared human story, and why do different spiritual texts have the same stories? These are the questions that we're going to explore today.
I was going to say, Neil, that there is a number of tribes in eastern Canada, in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, that have been wiped out entirely. The bands have been genocided.
Exactly. So it's amazing, the human story. On one level, you know, it's just human nature. This whole thing of like, you know, we live, we die, tribes get wiped out, new civilizations come about. It's not sad, because it is sad what has happened to these people, especially over the last few hundred years, you know, but it's part of human nature. We've been doing this since the beginning of time. So now all we can really do is honor them and pay them reverence through telling their story, you know. So the Sumerian origin story, and most of you have probably heard about this, and I'm going to start with this one because this is central to the disclosure community, the Sumerian origin story, and is also central to why I got into this in the first place. When I started doing research, what did I find? I found Jordan Maxwell. I found the Sons of God, which were the second level of gods from the planet Nibiru, and the Sumerian scriptures are what informed me about the Hindu texts, which then made me realize that there was truth to my Hindu upbringing. This is at like age 19, which made me start respecting and honoring the Hindu tradition as a viable source of information. So that's why I want to start with Sumerians. So the earliest record of Sumerian creation myth, called the Eridu Genesis, which is the beginning portion of this tablet, is actually missing, and it is part of the Enuma Elish saga, which is basically the creation story of the Sumerians. There are actually multiple Sumerian creation stories, and one other one that speaks about a specific god, not all of the gods. So basically, the premise is the gods An, Enlil, Enki, and Nihar-Sanga created the Sumerians and comfortable conditions for animals to live and procreate. Kingship, then descendants from heaven, and the first cities were founded. So after this happened, the first cities were founded, and these are the names of the cities. They actually do have locations and different names now in the Babylonian area, predominantly in Iraq. And after a missing section, so in this tablet, there's actually around 3 or 4 missing sections, so the whole thing isn't laid out. But after this missing section, we learned that the gods have decided not to save mankind from an impending flood, and Ziud-Sura, the king and priest, learns of this. In the later Akkadian version recorded in the Atrahasis epic, the gods of the waters warns the hero and gives him insight to build an ark. So does that sound familiar to anybody?
Oh, sure.
So what is this? This is the flood myth, right, guys? So this is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is actually the Epic of Ziusudra, and it's the story of Gilgamesh. And this flood myth is basically that, well, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story goes like this. The gods are sending a flood to destroy mankind. Enki, god of the underworld sea of fresh water, an equivalent of Babylonian Ea, warns Ziusudra to build a large boat through the directions for the boat, though the directions for the boat are also lost. When the tablet resumes, because of the lost part, it describes the flood. A terrible storm rages for 7 days and nights. The huge boat has been tossed about on the great waters. And that's a direct quote from the Epic of Gilgamesh. So as we just said, this reminds us very much of the story of Noah. And this is actually the smoking gun here of part of my third eye activation, was reading the Epic of Gilgamesh and being like, whoa, wait a second. This is actually the first story ever back in 2001 where I was like, wait a second. I'm reading a text here that somebody told me has information on extraterrestrial beings or star beings that came from another planet. And all of a sudden, now I'm reading this story about this guy who had to avoid a flood that the gods were creating. And I'll say, whoa, this sounds too much like Noah. And then, of course, I went down the rabbit hole on that, started researching it online, talking to other people. And yeah, it's definitely known that the Epic of Gilgamesh was the root for the Noah's Ark story. And what is the Noah's Ark story? God warned Noah that he was going to send a flood and instructed him to build a ship. He saved 2 of each type of animal. Epic of Gilgamesh goes into explain about the animals as well. So if that's the case, and these scriptures were written at completely different times, thousands of years apart from each other, either the Christian text and the Jewish text, the Old Testament, had taken from this other event, past civilization, or these cultures, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, are complete farce because they completely ripped off from something, and all these stories that they're saying are fake. That was what I was thinking in that moment in 2001. Either the Christian, Muslim, and Hebrew texts are talking about Anunnaki and extraterrestrials, and it relates to this story, or it's just a fabricated story that doesn't exist. And that's the only real result conclusion I could come to, because this wasn't the only story that was taken from ancient Sumeria and put in the Old Testament. So here are some other flood stories, deluge myths they're called. And the reason why I put myths in quotation is because I'm under the understanding that many of these stories are actually true or have a lot of truth in them. So when they say myth, it's really saying that it's like a fabricated fictional story that was created. But who's to say that some of this wasn't true, or even metaphors to explain true events? So maybe there were beings, but then we used bird instead, right? Metaphors to explain what they were actually seeing. Maybe there was a spacecraft, but they said winged metal bird instead, right? So other flood stories. Of course, we have the Mesopotamian flood stories, and there are many, not just the Sumerian one. We have the Palaya in Hinduism. We have the Gun Yu in Chinese mythology. We have the Pyra in Greek mythology, Bergelmir in Norse mythology, arrival of the first inhabitants of Ireland with Cessair in Irish folklore, and the lore of Quiche and the Mayan peoples in Mesoamerica. We have many native North Americans that talk about flood. And then we have the Canary Confederation in South America. We have African people and tribes, including Dogon, and sub-original tribes in Australia and more. So all of them have this similar flood story. So what is the flood connection? If you delve a little deeper, you can see that most ancient civilizations and origin stories are kind of split between antediluvian and post-diluvian worlds. Antediluvian basically means before the flood. Post-diluvian is after the flood. There seems to have been some huge cataclysmic event that created a worldwide flood in which almost every single culture on the planet actually has some sort of text describing not maybe the world before and the world after, but if they do not talk about the world before, they just talk about a flood and then the world begins after. So it's either a really ancient civilization that goes beyond the flood and says this is how our world was before the flood, or one coming after saying this is how our world was after the flood, and then the more recent religions that came onto the planet just talk about the post-flood. So we see this narrative in many ancient cultures and religions about there being a world before flood and a world after. So what is this? What was the flood? Was this a global reset? There have been speculation, and some of the theories that could have actually come about here are, I'll get to the theories in a second. So could this have been a global reset? Some of the dating in these texts can be traced to around 13,000 years ago. So not only do they talk about pre-flood and post-flood, but some of them actually give us information where it allows us to date back how long ago this flood was. And what do we come up to? We come up with the beginning of the end of the last ice age, 13,000 years ago, which ended around 11,700 BC. So some of the information that really makes me think maybe this was a global reset, or some of the theories behind this was this ET influence? You know, was this a program reboot? Some people say, some scholars actually have said that we were an extraterrestrial experiment, and the experiment wasn't doing right, and they had to restart over, and the flood was kind of part of that, and that's why the gods created the flood, the extraterrestrials created the flood. Others say that it was an asteroid that hit the planet. Some combine both those stories and say the extraterrestrials sent an asteroid to hit the planet and create this, and others say it's just a natural disaster that routinely happens on the Earth. So how about this concept? What if there was another extinction level event before the flood, right? Like, of course there probably was. So 13,000 years ago, we're talking about pre-diluvian, antediluvian civilizations before 13,000 years ago, and we're talking about them in the concept of mythology when it comes to how the world communicates about this. Mythology, fake, not real, might be, Atlantis is a myth, all this information about the world before 13,000 years ago. So what if something happened 13,000 years before that? 26,000 years before that, or even further and further back? If we're looking at the world 13,000 years ago and we're saying this could or could not be a real, this may or may not have existed because it's myth, think about all the stories that date back even further than that have been wiped out.
Right. There's actually the Stephen and Evan Strong, who are going to be on later on this evening. They actually talked about a cataclysm 70,000 years ago that almost wiped out the entire race, and it was a volcano, or was that when it was either a volcano or it was an asteroid, and it wiped out almost the entire. So there again, you had another deluge, right? And it wiped out the entire race, and that was 70,000 years ago. I actually did a show with them where they talked about it, and they'll probably talk about it later on tonight, where that wiped out almost the entire human race down to hundreds. And they were in three pockets on the planet. They were in Australia, Africa, and up in like Norway or Finland. That was it. And from there, all of the races came out once again. That was a part of their out of Australia theory.
Dude, that's amazing. I got to watch that one.
Yeah. They actually, if you go to their page, you can look that up. And if not, we'll prod them tonight and have them talk about it. But I did an interview with them where they talked about just that last year. Yeah, you can look it up on my page, bro.
Wow. Yeah, so, and there's actually information, and in the spiritual community, this has been said for a while, and now we're finding evidence as well that Earth has been destroyed by the 5 elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. 4 elements, and then the 5th one is ether. So the deluge was water, of course. The volcano could be fire, right? And has been recycled many times like that, but within one cycle. So let's say 26,000 years is one cycle, and 2 times we have a natural disaster in there. All five ways of, you know, the earth being recycled, if you will, happens every 13,000 years, and then it starts all over again. So 5 times 13,000 is like one cycle, and then it goes on and on and on. So it makes sense. Like this will definitely happen. And what I'm going to go into next is kind of some evidence to back what you just said, Leonard.
Right.
All right. So.
And everything's cyclical. So what if you were able to tie that in really quick? You know, that was 13,000 years ago. If you calculate back, where does that 70,000 year mark? How many cycles of 13,000 approximate years would it fall right in there? I bet it does. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh yeah, definitely, man.
Well, what time did the Yucatan asteroid occurrence happened? That was millions of years ago, wasn't it?
Well, there was that's a whole entire presentation on its own that I'm actually creating called The Journey Through the Mayan Empire that I'm creating because I've been there multiple times. So the Yucatan seems to have some sort of gravitational pull for asteroids. There was an asteroid that hit it in 700 BC, and then an asteroid, 800 BC, and then another asteroid that went in 700 BC, plus the one that you're talking about millions of years ago. Also, the asteroid that hit that they say could have been destroyed and ended the dinosaurs are all in that area. So I feel that. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Neil.
No, go ahead. Comment on it.
I was going to say also we have the zone of silence in Mexico that attracts meteors from space. Just wanted to talk that in there while you were saying that.
Yeah. So there's definitely something there when it comes to, and a part of this presentation that I have not finished my research on, so I'm not showing today, because this is a small portion of my full presentation on August 9th on Portal to Ascension called Creation Stories of Humanity. And that's going to be 3 hours long. So this whole thing is actually a 3-hour presentation. It goes real deep. Yeah. Okay. So, so the Yucatan, there's definitely something going on there. And even when the conquistadors went to the Yucatan in around 700, 800 BC, they actually landed in an entire area that was uninhabited. It was already evacuated. People think that the conquistadors landed and killed all the Mayans. That's not exactly what happened. They actually landed in, and then when they went inland, they went to Palenque. It was one of the first sites, Campeche, Palenque. And then when they went there, this place had been uninhabited for hundreds of years. It took them a while until they got further down, closer to the actual peninsula where Tulum is right now, where Uxmal is right now, where Playa del Carmen is, that whole area where they have sites. It took them a while before they actually ran into the Mayans. And the reason why the Mayans were uninhabited in that area is because of an asteroid. An asteroid was coming. They had to run and evacuate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why I vote for Asteroid Watch.
Right?
Yes, that's true. We have to look out for those things.
Yeah.
All right. So some scholars say that 13,000 years ago, the antediluvian civilization was Atlantis, and maybe other great civilizations existed then, and the beginning of Egypt. From speaking with many presenters, researchers, and doing my own research, there's two timelines that I actually I'm going back and forth between. One is a 36,000 year timeline that actually ancient Egypt could have been 36,000 years ago, rather than 13,000 years ago. But the other one is what is coming out from Robert Schoch and other people, is that around 13,000 years ago, there was a great civilization that had already been, decaying, and it was probably Atlantis. And this civilization had already had a few cataclysms, but the last one was at the end of the last ice age. There was a meteorite that hit the planet. This meteorite basically melted all the ice, like overnight almost, created a huge flood, and just took out the rest of Atlantis. But while this was happening, Egypt was actually being created, and the descendants of Atlantis were, if not 100% involved in Egypt, were definitely one of the civilizations that were creating Egypt. So Egypt and Atlantis actually had an overlap, and they basically escaped. Many people who survived from Atlantis escaped around 11,700 BC and made it into Egypt and took all of the wisdom from Atlantis to Egypt. That's another theory.
The meteor that you're talking about, Neil, could that meteor be the one that we recently discovered that hit Greenland?
That's quite possible, actually.
Because you're mentioning about the ice melting, right? So I could imagine if the meteor hit Greenland, all that ice that's there would have just instantly melted.
Yeah, exactly. And even if like a huge meteorite that like maybe killed many people hit almost anywhere on the Earth, it will definitely create a cloud. It will block out the sun. There would be worldwide effects for sure.
Well, let me ask you this, Neil. Since you're talking about the Atlanteans and the Egyptians and how a lot of them escaped there and they were sort of coexisting. Thoth or Toth, depends on how you want to say it. In the Emerald Tablets, he says that the Atlanteans, with their technology, messed with the as above, so below, the 3, 6, and 9, and they caused the ice age to melt, because if they stopped the Earth from turning, the mantle, of course, because of the inertia would keep moving, the poles would shift, and if the poles shifted suddenly in any direction and all of the ice from the caps ended up elsewhere other than at the caps, they would melt, and then we would have a deluge. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's quite possible too. And I see that mainstream archaeology is finding evidence now of an asteroid hitting, and it's actually already common knowledge that 13,000 years ago, that at the end of the ice age, there was an asteroid that hit. But I think there was definitely many things happening, and it might even be like something spiritual, like a reflection of our own consciousness attracting this cataclysm. And part of that could have been the way they were experimenting with this technology was such that they were manifesting a reality that was going to basically take them out.
That's what I lean to.
Can I interject something here? It's another theory by a scientist. He wrote a book. I believe his spelling of his last name was Patten. He projected on the the waters above the waters. And he says at one time we had a canopy of water surrounding the earth, which is one reason why there was extended lifespans going to hundreds of years, because the water surrounding the earth filtered out a lot of the bad radiation. So there was a natural extended lifespan for the people living below. That canopy of water collapsed. Could have been, asteroid or something caused it to collapse. And he says today, even to this day, you can see the outline of that canopy of water with the cosmic. Oh gosh, I had it on the tip of my tongue. That used to be Van Allen belt, the radiation belt around the Earth, still gives the outline of the canopy of water.
Well, and I'll further that, Steve. I'll further that with they also, if you look in history at these guys, before they had these telescopes like we have now, and that we named all these telescopes after, like Copernicus, and we have the Hubble and all of that. Those guys back in history saw these things that we couldn't see until we had these giant telescopes, and that also played to the theory that we had all of this water up there in the ionosphere, and even with a small telescope, you would be able to draw the lines that are the canals on Mars, because you could see them, because it would be, sorry to you flat earthers, but it would be rounded, and it would act like a lens, and it was like a big giant telephoto lens where they could see what's going on, and that plays into the 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and that's when that canopy burst, and all of that water ended up here on Earth.
Yeah.
And that kind of tells you, if you think about where our water level is now, even if we had an ice age, and if you do the math, guys, this is not me being cuckoo, if you do the math, even during the ice age, when the ice was all the way down to cover most of the United States, that still doesn't make up enough water to show how high our oceans are currently today, if you were to freeze all that water and pull it out of the oceans. Because we know that even now our oceans are still rising, and people didn't want to believe that there was anything out there in the ocean. And they talked about the gods in India living in a city that was off the shore, and they said, well, it couldn't be there because the ocean's there. Well, guess what? Last year they found it 50 miles down in the ocean. And at one point the ocean level was that much lower.
Yeah, I believe you're talking about the Warka, and I can even add to that. I watched a documentary just a couple of nights ago, and this guy had a very interesting theory, and this is kind of where the flat Earth comes into. What he was saying is that back in the day, there was a disk, and that disk was filled with liquid, and from its own weight, it imploded in on itself and caused the sphere effect that we have right now, and that's where all the water came from.
Well, this is just one scientist's theory, and he said it explained the waters above the waters comment in the Bible. There may be other holy texts that also mention this. I don't know. Have you discovered any, Neil?
Yeah, I have, and I think I have it in this presentation, but I've definitely got them in my notes at least to add it to this later. But the splitting of the earth and the heavens and the water component is predominant in many different ancient cultures.
Yeah, I'll let you carry on, Neil.
Yeah, so to speak to your point, and you gave me some good insight to add to this presentation, is that there are other stories of how the flood occurred, not just an asteroid, right? Just geological study is now showing that something happened to Earth, but there definitely are many ancient civilizations that have antediluvian stories.
Well, if the water did burst, like Steve said, it could have been an asteroid that came in, boom, hit that. All the water's coming down, deluge, everybody dies. Right?
And that explains why the longevity of people going into hundreds of years, they weren't getting any deteriorating radiation from the sun because it was filtered out. And once that water canopy collapsed, they had no filter anymore.
Right. I think how long people would live in that case. And if you look at
I don't know.
history, it shows where there was times, even in the Bible, it shows there was a time when people were living thousands of years. Well, maybe the water canopy was up there.
That makes you wonder about the chemtrails of what they're trying to do,
like Noah was what 575 years old when he had his first child. 900
Right.
years old, something insane like that.
Yep.
Anyways, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit into antediluvian, post-diluvian. So, firstly, I'm going to read this from the journey of the journal. I wrote it wrong here. Journal of Geology and Natural Disasters, and this is a mainstream scientific study. And even I don't understand all of this information here, so I'm going to read it, take what you can, and then I'm going to explain what that means right afterwards. So, what they've discovered is Earth accelerates on its path to the ice period and slows during its back to the global warming period. For example, slowdown happens between two leveling of the planet axis of the rotation with the solar one, which means roughly 13,000 years. So they've found out that the Earth has this slowing pace and speeding up of its axis every 13,000 years. I'm going to skip the next one because it goes into a lot of jargon, but you have the slides if anyone wants to check it and read it later. But what does this mean? Jean-Pierre Vallée, a geophysicist from Paris Institute of Earth Physics, believes that magnetic pole shifts occur from 13,000 years to 40,000 years, still longer than previous estimates. But then there are many other articles that say 13,000 years. However, just recently, they're actually thinking maybe it takes a little longer. So what does this mean? This means that Earth is adhering to some sort of cosmic pattern that attracts various forms of natural disasters, that every 13,000 years or so, something actually happens. And through geological surveys and studies, you can actually see, in the Earth's crust, what actually happened around that time. And it's why I say attracting various forms of natural disasters is maybe something's happening on Earth where there's earthquakes, but to actually pull an asteroid from outer space that has nothing to actually do with what's happening internally on Earth, but it being sent here, that implies that maybe there's some sort of grand design, or maybe there's some sort of etheric projection going on where 13,000 years some sort of thing has to happen and we're actually attracting it. So here's just to show you that this is actually legit. Here's the journey of Journal of Geography and Natural Disasters, and this is where it basically says that. And what does it say here? 4 periodical natural big disasters of the planet Earth during each precession cycle caused by its motion. New theory. This is mainstream based on this scientific research. And what did they say it is? Every 13,000 years. This journal actually went even further to show how the Earth looked before the flood and how the Earth looks after the flood, and what the axis of the Earth will be for the future floods and today. So
well, the cyclical rate, you can extrapolate that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Black secret of the blue planet. Why did they say that? This isn't some alternative conspiracy stuff. Like, they're literally saying, like, this is how the Earth is moving, and because of these movements and these slowdowns and pole shifts that occur, these natural disasters happen, and great civilizations can and could have actually been wiped out because of it. So now we're going to move into ancient Egypt, guys.
Before you run into that, Neil, I was just going to say, how we have these mass extinctions that take place every 26 million years or so, almost like clockwork. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if the same thing is happening with this 13,000 year timeline.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I definitely think, but maybe not on that level, Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, okay, so we know the precession of the equinox, let's say it's around 26,000 years. It's more like 25,000 something, right? And then we have basically we're going through a secular nature. Mm-hmm. And within that, you have different stages. We have the Kali Yuga, which we're supposedly in now. We have the Bronze Age. We have the Silver Age. We have the Golden Age. And we're heading out of the Kali Yuga. We're going into the Bronze Age. And eventually we'll go into Golden Age. Many cultures...
I love what you just said, because I continue to hear again and again and again on the internet or on Facebook that we're going into the golden age. And, people are just not getting it. They actually have to go through the bronze and the silver in order to get to the golden age.
Yeah.
Right? So, we essentially just left the Kali Yuga around 2012.
Well, they also say we're going into the, I'm already in the 4th dimension. I'm in the 4th density already. I'm going to the 5th now.
Yeah.
I'm like, really, you can't skip and go from 3D life to 5D life before you even find out what 4D life is, guys.
Yeah.
That's like saying I'm born, now I can swim. Well, you kind of can, but only in your mom's womb.
That's funny. So not only are there those cycles, but within each cycle, there's smaller cycles that have golden ages, bronze age, silver age, and dark age. So there's actually a gold age off the bronze age. There's a silver age off the bronze age. There's a Kali Yuga off the bronze age. And even in the golden age, there's a Kali Yuga off the golden age. The darkest part.
I never even thought about it like that.
And that goes into Hindu's zodiac. They actually explain
and if you listen, Neil, if you listen to the Law of One, according to Ra, that's exactly the case, because within every octave, which an octave would be a cyclical time period, which is time moving forward is also a vibration, and the vibration is an octave. So every octave has infinite layers. That's where we get that onion thing. Has infinite layers within infinite layers, and that all goes to, and then this is where you may be going with it, but I'm not sure. But that all ties into your chakra points, because you have the main chakras, and then at every joint in your hand, fingers, elbows, anything that moves is another chakra point, a smaller chakra point. So in the universe, we have, like he was saying now, you have these cyclical events, time events, and then you have smaller ones within smaller ones within smaller ones. And again, this is the 3, 6, and 9. This is that natural spiral that goes infinitely inward, 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 and then outward, 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 and then back over onto itself, which creates the entire cyclical everything, the whole entire universe. And that's how the Mayans could figure out that calendar that was so long, and how Neil's talking about over in Eastern philosophy. They would know all these ages within ages within ages because it's predictable. Sorry, go ahead. I just needed to clarify that. For
where are we at exactly now?
So we're supposedly going into the Bronze Age, but we're entering. It's supposed to be like the golden age of the Bronze Age is where we are going to be able to go within our own lifetimes and live like longer lives. Honestly, if you want to know more about this, Tricia McCannon did a whole entire presentation on our website, and she basically broke down all the zodiacs, and the main one is like a couple 100,000 years, and all the other ones are cycles within those 100,000 years. And even if you look at the Mayan calendar, you can see one big cycle, but it has the other cycle that rotates around it.
Yep.
It's
like a wheel, and within a wheel, kind of like what Ezekiel was talking about.
There's actually 3 of them in the Mayan calendar. There's the large one, isn't it? That they have the small one is the Baktuns. Is that right? I'm trying to get this all right now.
I think so. I'm not too sure, but
the small one. I think
this
the small one's
supposed to be
there's 13 Baktuns, but there's 3,500 and something days or something like that.
Yeah, and 3,500. I think there's
years.
There's 4 of them, which equals.
Was this supposed to be some kind of a code that wasn't easy to figure out? Because it sure seems awful complicated that just even in Mayan culture, the average person wouldn't be able to figure that out.
Well, if you know what phi is, not pi, but phi, which is if you look at the sequence, and you look at that being the triangles, and then you take the arc from the triangle points on the outside, which becomes the spiral. That equation is basically the answer to the universe. You just have to understand it. And
that's what Michael Feely was talking about this morning.
Yeah, what is it? 1.648 or 84 or something like that. I don't have it memorized. I apologize for that.
Yeah,
I'd have to look on my YouTube page because I actually did a short video on it.
Yeah, and to answer your question, actually, the common people in the Mayan Empire didn't actually know. It was not that it was like hidden from them, or they were told they weren't allowed to learn it. It was actually something to be translated by the priests, the astronomers, the mathematicians, the elite of society. And even when you go to Palenque, there's actually a building where all the ones that I just mentioned, mathematicians, astronomers, elite philosophers, would all live in the same building and meet on top of the building in the temple every so often to discuss these kind of topics. So the commoner really didn't spend their time doing it. It was up to these elite in order to translate it for the commoners.
Yeah, that sounds like the elite of the secret societies.
Yeah, I was going to say they've always been like that, buddy.
Yeah, it's like
always been that way.
It's human nature, man. In this dimension, anyway.
It's 1.618. I apologize, guys. I couldn't remember that. 1.618, the golden ratio.
All right, should I move on?
Yes, please.
I'm going to go for 20 more minutes, and then I'll stop, and we can have a little discussion then.
Cool, man.
Okay. So ancient Egyptian origin, and and my promo video on this, I told you we're gonna have a little bit of story time. So now I'm going to actually explain this. I kind of wrote the story in my own words here, but I'm going to explain it, and definitely this is only a part of it. The story goes on even more. So here we go. Ancient Egyptian origin. Before creation, according to the Egyptian mythology, only darkness embraced the primeval ocean out of which life would come. When the breath of life was strong and ready, the entity called Atum, connected to Adam, of course, decided it was time for creation to begin. An island emerged from the water to support this divinity, who manifested itself into the form of Ra, the sun god of Egypt. On the primeval hill, Ra created out of himself the first gods, Shu, which is the dryness and air, and his partner Tefnut, which was humidity, who would engender other gods to complete the cosmos. Jeb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess, in turn, these two birthed the principles of life, namely Osiris being the perfect being who eventually would rule over the rest of the world, which Ra was busy creating by naming the elements. And by the way, humankind happened out of the tears of his eyes. So Osiris was a kind and wise ruler who taught humans agriculture and civilization, with his sister/wife Isis, who helped her husband with creativity and magic. They formed the perfect couple. Their brother Seth was strong but unruly, the opposite of his brother. In fact, Seth envied Osiris so much that he killed him so he could inherit his throne and rule Egypt the way he wanted. Seth's sister/partner, Nephthys, could not stop the murder despite her love for their siblings. So killing Osiris turned out to be not so bad of an idea, because he was then resurrected through the magic of his wife long enough to impregnate her with her son Horus, who would later avenge his father and recapture the throne of Egypt. Then Osiris departed to the other world to rule over the deceased, thus ensuring resurrection and the cycle of life.
Sounds like the biblical account, but in more disguise.
Yes.
I just wondered, how do you connect? This is probably very accurate here, but how do you connect the dots to the biblical account? I'm quite sure people in Palestine and Nazareth and that wouldn't do that naturally, but this obviously is the beginning of the birth story.
Yes.
And I just wonder how can people connect the dots to discover all this?
Yeah. So that's exactly why I created this presentation, because that's what I want to know too, and that's what I'm exploring. And I'll begin to do it because this presentation's only half done. I've got a lot more stuff I got to put in here, and each of these things can go into so much more. And I don't know if you can notice, but the word resurrected, and if you guys, whoever's following this presentation or whoever sees me do a full presentation on August 9th, whatever words I've highlighted and made big, I'm going to do it a little bigger in the future for people to see. There's a reason for that. That's the connecting words. So now we have in this story, we have Atum, which is Adam, right, from the Old Testament. We have, let's see, what else do we have here that connects to biblical scripture besides, obviously, the obvious one, resurrected, right? So let's move on here. So the whole concept of resurrected, God dying and coming back, it seems to be a story that is really common throughout many ancient creation stories that you would not even think have any similarities. The conventional mainstream Christian at the church down my street, if I went there and told them that, hey, that your creation story in the beginning and all of that actually comes from ancient Egypt, but probably even comes from even older texts, maybe even Sumerians, and has some connection to the pagan religion of Hinduism, they would probably freak out or think that I'm a blasphemer or I'm off the devil, because of the fact that I'm literally saying that their religion comes from something that could be pagan in nature. And we know that mainstream Christianity has this whole paganism devil kind of mentality, right? But it all came from someplace. And there's actually a lot of information to suggest that the monotheistic religions were never really monotheistic religions. It was just one of the gods, one of the many gods, basically said, hey, all of you guys, you're my followers now. You need to follow what I'm saying, and this is what we're going to do. So when it comes to the three major religions in the world, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, what do we have? We have Yahweh. But Yahweh even says in biblical text in the Old Testament says that you will choose no other God but me. Wait,
Yeah.
what do you mean? No other God but me.
Right.
It even says in the beginning were the Elohim. What is the Elohim? It's plural for goddesses. Goddesses, female God, and multiple ones. But what happens is when we translate Phoenician Canaanite, which was the original language that that text was written in, into Hebrew, and then into what we have now, you lose Elohim as being a plural, and it becomes a single. And then all of a sudden, people think that it was a monotheistic religion in the first place. But no, the Elohim, the goddesses, created us in their image.
Did you say now this is being traced back to the Sumerian religion or culture?
Yeah, there's definitely connections. There's the biggest connection I would say would be the Greek mythology. Greek mythology has hardcore like similarities and connections to ancient Egypt, ancient Vedic text, and also Sumerian. Like they share similar gods, they share similar stories, but it seems like the Greek culture kind of took from many of them. And in Greek text, for every Greek god, there's a corresponding Egyptian god. For every Greek god, there's a corresponding Hindu god. Like, for example, Indra is Zeus, even has the exact same story. Okay, so
yeah, and the creation story is almost identical throughout most of our history and most cultures, including even the Viking history of their gods, of Odin and everything that is about all of them. They're all almost like they're telling the same story, and they just have different names for that particular deity. But the creation stories are almost identical across the board.
Yeah.
And to add to that, Kali Ma in India is the same as Cronus in the Greek mythology. So there's a lot of correlation and similarities between all of them.
Yeah, I read some articles and some information specifically on the Greek gods and their corresponding Indian gods, and I wrote down all the Greek gods, what they have in common, and what the names of the Indian gods are. I'm going to do another presentation called "The Root of All Religion" that will delve into that. Cool. But cultures that are completely different, like the Greeks definitely have a connection in Europe, right? And many European cultures actually hold the Greeks in high regard because of that. But then you go to India, and this place that has kind of been designated as on the far east and has been cut off from the rest of the world and has brown people compared to white people. But then you see the religions are almost exactly the same, and you start wondering why. And but a little bit of research, you realize the Greeks even had outposts in ancient India during the Vedic age, when Vedic text was still being circulated around, and probably shared a lot of culture with each other, and maybe integrated into their own religions.
Mm-hmm. Neil, let me ask you a question. Have you heard of Joseph Campbell?
Yes.
Have you read some of his stuff?
Just heard about him.
Oh, you should, because he did a book. In fact, he has a book that's called "The God with a Thousand Faces," which he talks about, or talked, because he's passed, but he talks about this very thing in the creation, the mythos, and all that. You might want to look into that, especially if you're going down the road of doing a seminar. You might want to look at what he had to offer, because everything you're saying right now, I thought for sure you knew who he was and had read his material, and we're trying to further.
What's his name again, Leonard?
Joseph Campbell.
And what was the name of the book?
The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
The Hero.
Yeah, the Hero. I'm sorry, not the God, the Hero. He's written many, many books. You can Google them, you can put them on YouTube. In fact, you can look up what I just said, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. There's a 44-minute question and answer session where he talks about that. And they have a whole bunch of videos they put together. They have a whole foundation dedicated to his life and his work. And Neil, you're like him resurrected, bro.
No freaking way, dude. All right, I gotta check him out.
Although he was alive when you were alive, but I'm telling you, if you go and look at what he has to say and read some of his stuff, you're going to go, oh my God, I'm going down the same road this man went down. He was a professor, and he taught what you're talking about.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll check him out. Yeah, I need what you guys are witnessing now is the beginning of the coalescing of what I've been thinking ever since I was a kid. Like, where did we all come from? Why are we doing all these religious scriptures? So I'm trying to I really want to do story where I track back history to like the first story, you know.
Mhm.
I
That
don't know
would
if
be
it's
great.
possible. I don't know if it's
That would
possible.
save us a lot of worry.
Yeah, I know, right? So any kind of like, there's so much information, man. It takes a lot to figure out how to present it.
Yeah.
You know?
I actually hear you. I've been working on my Saturn webinar for about the last year,
Yeah.
and it's only now that I've come to a completion, and I just didn't know how to, put it together and present it. And so I get you where you're coming from that, Neil.
Definitely. All right, I'm gonna go for another 10. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, God. So now we're talking about resurrection. So let's talk about God's being reborn or resurrected in different scriptures. Another commonality in many creation stories. Many stories feature a God who dies and often returns to life, and it's most common in Near Eastern mythologies. You know, Mesopotamia and around that area. The anthropologist Sir James Fraser compared these dying god myths in his multi-volume work, The Golden Bow. So if anybody wants to go into that, that's the book right there. The Egyptian god Osiris and Mesopotamian god Tammuz are examples of dying god, and the Greek myths of Adonis has often been compared to Osiris, and the myth of Dionysus also features death and rebirth. And of course, you know, the one that's known the most, which is the Christian story of Jesus, him dying and being reborn, resurrection. Many people say, including myself, is that the resurrection story is a symbolization of reincarnation and that the soul never dies. And the reason why Jesus even did it was to symbolize that, hey, you're eternal and you reincarnate. There are people that say in the Council of Nicaea, around 325 AD, Constantine took out a lot of scriptures with certain elite of Christian society, and one of which was information on reincarnation. So the reason why Christianity does not believe in reincarnation, like if you're a conventional Christian, is because of that. So anyone say something?
Isn't there a biblical a script that kind of alludes to reincarnation?
Yeah, people call it the Book of Reincarnation, and it was the gospel, one of the many gospels that were taken out of the ones that we have now. So,
But I mean, it's still are in the scriptures. They feel it does allude to some type of reincarnation.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and
so
if you look at
another
really
one.
quickly, I know you're trying to get your time in, but really quickly, if you look at the cycle of nature, like you were talking about, that, and another one is the Green Man, right? The Green Man. In fact, I have on a. If you look on the camera here, let me see if I can get it on camera here. Probably won't focus. I don't think it's there. Look, it's carved on there. I actually have it tattooed on my back as well. Now, the Green Man shows the same cycle of life that they changed Jesus's idea to. That shows as the time goes when Lent is at the winter. But if you look at our planet runs. We think it runs on a 12-month cycle, but in truth, it does not. It's cyclical and it runs in a 13 moon calendar. If you go by that, that's a 13-month year before the Romans started pulling days from all the months because Augustus wanted more days in his month, and which is true. That's why we got this crazy Gregorian calendar that we're using now. Then there's that cycle of 13, which would be 13,000. Again, Neil, I just wanted to point that out. So go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And 13, the number 13, man, that's like a whole day conference seminar itself.
I've
right?
already done 2 shows that were 3 hours long on that, bro.
Yeah. It's freaking amazing. All right. So Greek creation story. And due to time, I'm just going to read the first paragraph because I want to go to the other slides that talk about the first paragraph. But if you want to hear the whole thing, you can check it out, portalextension.org, online events, creation story, August 9th. And here we go. In the beginning, there was darkness. So darkness. The only thing in this void was Nyx, a bird with black wings. With the wind, she laid a golden egg, and for ages she sat upon this egg. Finally, life began to stir in the egg, and out of it rose Eros, the god of love. One half of the shell rose into the air and became the sky, and the other became the earth, which is the splitting of the heavens that we see in so many texts. Eros named the sky Uranus, and the earth he named Gaia. Then Eros made them fall in love. So it goes into it more, and as I said, I'll speak about that later. But what do we have here? We have 3 things that one of them I didn't highlight. There was darkness. It seems darkness, emptiness, and void is used in many scriptures all over. And then we have golden egg. Golden egg, this is what I was saying earlier about how the Greek one is kind of like an umbrella for the whole world, which coincidentally almost sits exactly in the middle of all these cultures that we're talking about. You know, so maybe it had influence through Mediterranean trade, whatever. So we got the darkness, we got the gold egg, and then we have the splitting of the heavens. The splitting of the heavens is everywhere. It's even in the Bible creation story. So Here's the rest of the story here. We're going to skip forward. So the cosmic egg and emptiness. Let's talk about two of those components. We have several mythologies, including one developed in China, begin with the splitting of a cosmic egg. In the Chinese version, this is followed by the growth of a giant whose limbs eventually form the observable world. A dismembered giant features also in the Germanic or Norse account of creation. So that's the emptiness component. I mean, the egg component.
That's pretty cool. You mentioned that, Neil, because in the Dogon, they call the universe what is that? A Dunotol, I believe. This called, and its meaning is the egg. The universe is an egg, and then also we have this egg mythology in a lot of Aboriginal cultures as well.
Yeah. So the Germanic version begins with the magic emptiness, right? So emptiness, again, one of the most characteristic features of creation stories. So it's saying here that emptiness, void, is one of the most characteristic features. And what does mainstream science say? This is just a metaphor for mainstream science. There was nothing, there was void, and there was the Big Bang. So even what we're taught in school is basically this. The Hebrews imagine a first moment when all is void, with darkness on the face of the deep. In Greece, the story begins with chaos, meaning a gaping emptiness. In Egypt and Mesopotamia, a boundless ocean sets the primal scene. So we're going to go into a little bit more into the cosmic egg. And I broke down here a few different cultures, just kind of their story about the egg, just to show you the prevalence of this whole concept of the egg. The ancient Egyptians saw the cosmic egg as the soul of the primeval waters out of which creation arose. The Chinese creation myth describes a huge primordial egg containing the primal being, the giant Pangu. The egg broke, and Pangu then separated chaos into the many opposites of the yin and yang. We have duality talked about in this one, into creation itself. The Satpatha Brahmana of India contains the story of the desire of the original maternal waters, desire to reproduce. Through a series of prolonged rituals, the waters became so hot that they gave birth to a golden egg. Eventually, after about the time it takes for a woman or a cow to give birth, the creator, Prajapati, emerged from the egg and creation took place. So this goes back to what we're talking about, the flood, and how there was waters in the heaven, and then there was some sort of like water, water broke, right? And we got birthed into creation. It's the beginning of creation. Within this egg, normally within these stories, in the egg, typically resides a divine being who literally created himself from nothing. That's how it normally exists. The creator then goes on to form the material universe. So there's the egg, there's void, there's nothingness. There's something inside the egg. The egg cracks, it opens up. And then what happens after that? Material universe, just like the Big Bang. The Pelasgian myth of creation lays the world egg on the waters of chaos and orders a cosmic snake. So snake's highlighted there because that's another commonality in origin stories, named Ophion, to encircle it until it hatched the world itself. And then we have the Finnish creation epic. The world is created from the fragments of an egg laid by a duck on the knee of the primordial sea goddess. The Zoroastrian tradition created the world from chaos again. He gathered the turbulent material and formed it into a great egg. From the upper part of its shell, he formed the sky, and from the lower half, he forged the earth. Now we have Slavic, and I'm just drilling through these fast, guys, because I just want to give them all credit here. The Slavic mythology says the supreme being created a divine egg from the void, inside of which rested Svarog, god of fire. So this is the Egyptian, the Greek part really goes into this because the Slavic thing and the god of fire is connected to the fact that Prometheus gave humanity the gift of fire, and that was the only gift we were allowed. And Zeus was really upset at Prometheus, and then tied Prometheus up against a mountain and let a bird peck at its liver for all of eternity because Prometheus gave us fire. As his life force grew, the egg cracked open. The lower shell became the earth and the sea, out of which grew a world tree, pushing the upper shell skyward, creating the firmament. Polynesian Tahitians have a myth in which the god began existence in an egg and eventually broke out to make part of the egg the sky. And the Dogon, as we were talking about earlier, says that in the beginning, a world egg divided into two birth sacs containing sets of twins, fathered by the creator god, Amma, on the maternal egg. And then Japanese mythology, creation begins with the world as a chaotic, chaos again, formless mass. Then indefinable sound filled the void, setting the particles in motion, which formed into an egg.
Sounds like the frame, leading into quantum physics here, just in terms and words that are very primitive.
Exactly. And it's really like what I like to say is metaphysics is metaphorical quantum physics, because you're talking about like in metaphysics, you have oneness. In quantum physics, you have singularity. In metaphysics, you have aura. In quantum physics, you have electromagnetic field. It's the same thing, just a metaphoric way to explain it. And that's what these individuals were doing. Even when they talk about snake, there's many representations of the snake that make you believe that the snake was actually a representation of advanced science, quantum physics, wormhole technology, just the way that they utilize it. So
makes you wonder if ancient knowledge is really all that ancient.
Exactly. Or if it's just coming back again. Oh, the same information is out there the whole time. We just keep forgetting it and rediscovering it.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards what you just said. I think it's a cycle that continues to repeat itself. It's like I asked a question when I was younger. I asked, how is it that everybody in the world got fire, the technology of fire at the same time? How is it that everybody got the bow and arrow technology at the same time, right? And you just answered that question.
Even why were there like great philosophers all were here at the same time? All these things like prophets and sages all came at the same time. Like it is a cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that plays into the whole theory.
It's called the Axis Age, when Buddha, then I forgot the other two or three, Confucius.
Yeah.
And who else was there? Was a couple other that existed at the same time. I wrote an article on this a couple of years ago called the Axis Age.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you look into like in the Law of One, they're literally there's cycles where like 75,000 year cycles, 13,000 year cycles, just like what you're talking about, and these cycles are where the human race starts over. The human race gets to a certain point, and then there's supposed to be a culling of souls that are supposed to graduate, and those who don't recycle and start over. And that doesn't mean you just get resurrected and things move forward, because if so, we would have had space travel and then kept space travel, and we'd be one of the ancients, but we're not. So what happens is literally something happens, and there's a 75,000 year cycle, and at the end of that cycle, and then the sub-cycles in between are 13,000 year. And at the end of every 13,000 year cycle, which we're supposed to be at the end of one and the beginning of the next, then that's when things recycle and you either move up or you start over, which would suggest that we get wiped out and the race is still here, but on a smaller level, and everybody is back to caveman status, and we start moving up, and you learn the same things at the right time that you're supposed to, because it's a cycle, it's cyclical, it's the way the universe works. That's what the entire concept of the Law of One talks about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm with Neil.
That goes back to the one.
I'm with Neil. I'd like to go back and find a first story.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you. I'll give you the first story. Here's the first story in a nutshell that everyone agrees to. In the beginning, the earth was void.
Yes.
In the beginning, the universe was void and it was darkness. And then the one created the universe.
Straight up, bro.
Can move out to any religion from there, and the story changes only but a bit until you get to that. We don't want to have God involved, and boom, it happened by itself. The science.
Well, some of the latest theories say we were created by bumping up against another universe, and that the universes are constantly in contention, bumping into each other.
From what I understand, what they say now, I agree with you, because they're talking about black holes being actually the birth canal of a new universe. When the universe is too full or bumps up against another universe, a black hole is created. So that, and that's also in the Law of One, that the universe expands to a certain point, and when it's too big and there's too much inside, then like a bubble, like an egg, it erupts, and that's a black hole that goes to another place, and boom, another universe is created. That's what that was claimed from the LL Research Group in 1984, bro.
Hmm. Yeah. So okay, look, we have
somebody in the universe.
right, definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip the next part on the Hindu scriptures. You know, if you want to listen to that, you can come to the presentation on the 9th of August. But this, just like what you're saying, like this is literally a scientific thing as well. Like what we're talking about, the egg is in essence what probably happened in the first place, not just through metaphysics and mythology, but through actual science. And
Yeah.
cosmological models actually maintain that this is mainstream now, that 13.8 billion years ago, the entire mass of the universe was compressed into a gravitational singularity, the so-called cosmic egg, from which it expanded to its current state following the Big Bang. So whether there was just something at the center of the void, if that could even be a reality, right, that exploded, or whether we bumped into another universe that created an explosion in a localized part of our void, therefore starting creation from where we bumped in, right? Those are two possibilities. Metaphysics say that the cosmic egg represents potentiality, right? And truly, the Big Bang is that. What did whatever was compressed into that small egg before everything became material? What was it? It was infinite potential.
Yep.
It is the pre-creation held within chaos, waiting to become the cosmos. This duality then sets up a conflict found throughout world mythology, the duality of chaos and order, good and evil, light and dark, love and hate. It was the beginning of the duality of this dimension.
That brings up another question. When will this universe expand to its extinction?
Exactly. Or will it?
Yeah, it's traveling at the light speed. It couldn't go any faster than that. But at some point, it's going to be so expanded, it won't exist anymore, or so it would seem.
Billion or 500 billion years or something from now. There's an actual definite number that the scientists, I think Hawking came up with a number and said this is how far it goes before it starts to collapse.
You know, this almost kind of sounds like we were talking about with the Earth earlier, where we had a flat disk with the water that imploded and it turned into a sphere. And this here kind of sounds like the same thing, where the universe, which in itself is a sphere, expands, and gets to a certain point, and then it implodes in on itself, thus creating a big bang and creating another universe. Right, like essentially just recycling itself, right, just again and again and again.
That's that theory, and it's usually with the number 13 once again, where and it comes back in. And if you think about that, that's 3, 6, and 9. You're spiraling outward, and then something flips you over, right? The 3 and the 6 are spiraling opposite of each other, one going out, one going in, and the 9 flips them over on each other, and so they're constantly in flux, going outward to a certain point that is, infinite, and then becoming inward spiraling, and so it's all one entire thing constantly moving. It becomes the torus, which is the sacred geometry 1.648 or 18.
Yeah, the number 13 is in a lot of legends and a lot of stories.
That's because the cycle of 13 is prevalent in the entire universe and everything that we do. Just like Neil was saying earlier, with the different cycles in the different years, the 13,000 years. That happens over and over in nature, in everything, in the universe, everywhere, everything on a scale that goes from, infinitely small to finite, infinite, and to infinitely large. And again, that's the sacred geometry again.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting comment from
for Portal to Ascension. That's the sacred geometry that he uses right there. You can see it.
Triskel Spire says, Blavatsky says one of the first times the beings were trees or pods, and the children were born by podding from the main thing. Sounds like the idea of a universe podding off one another.
Right.
And another egg. But what's the pod of a tree but an egg of the tree? Do you see?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of stories actually connecting the tree of life to the egg of creation as well.
Well, because the fruit of the tree is the egg of the tree. It's the life giver, the life bringer of the tree. When you take an acorn, if the acorn falls from a tree, that acorn will become a tree.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, Triskel goes on to say, and also there was apparently a type of being, the third type, that was born from an egg, similar symbolism. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Culture. Their goddess showed up in an egg floating in the ocean.
Yeah,
well,
it's amazing.
Estar was, I think, in an egg too, wasn't she?
Mhm.
Ashton?
The goddess Estar,
Uh,
the Easter
yeah, well,
creation.
yeah, definitely. Well, the pagan tradition of Easter is definitely connected to the egg and that god.
And that's
You're right.
the creation. It's the cycle of life. Yes.
Okay, just to finish up here now, we're on the last part. I'm not going to read this, but you can come later to hear it. But this is just one of the sound creation stories that has geometry in there. So just some sound in creation stories. The Australian Aborigines speak of 3 sacred songs. The song path sung by the primordial ancestor spirits who walked across their landscape, singing its land forms into being. So sound creating land. The Hindus, we have 6 days of in Christianity, we have 6 days of creation. We have the six aspects of Om, which is the sound, 6 solfeggio frequencies, 6 aspects of all-seeing eye of Horus. And then something that many of you probably feel is similar to other texts, which is from the Krishna Yajurveda, which is in the beginning was Brahman, with whom was the word, and the word is Brahman. So what does that sound like? It sounds like
Creed, yes.
yeah, exactly. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God, which is the Bible, John 1:1. So if you really want to talk about how sound actually created it all in the most quantum physics origin story, you can actually go straight to this Old Testament. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So what is it saying here? It's saying in the beginning was the Word. It doesn't say God was there. It says the Word was there in the beginning, and the Word was with God. 2 separate entities, the Word and God. And the Word was God. What do we have? The first ever paradox. Not only was the Word God, but the Word was also with God. What are we? We're gods, but we're also separate from the one. We're like this walking, talking paradox.
Right.
He was with God in the beginning. Who's he? Who's he? He is the Word. The Word was with God in the beginning. Through him, who's him? The Word, sound. Through sound, all things were made. Without sound, nothing was made that has been made. Vibration frequency creates all physical matter. In him, who are we talking about here? We're talking about the Word still, was life. See, a lot of people actually in conventional Christianity, they forget what we're talking about and they start thinking he, him, all that is God. But if you just follow it, you can actually see what it's referring to. He was with God. God wasn't with God. Sound was with God. Through sound, all things were made. Without sound, nothing was made that has been made. In sound was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, boom, darkness once again. And the darkness has not overcome it. The light separates the darkness. What is that?
Omar, aren't you writing a book on frequencies?
Yeah, called Earth Frequency, the commandeered bandwidth. Essentially, in it, what I talk about is the consciousness and how there's one single consciousness, and that we are an expression or a focus of attention of that infinite consciousness, and that we are the one become the whole, and the whole become the one. And I discussed death in there as well, because death is just all it is. It's just a shift in focus of attention. Our energy was before and it will be after. So there's really no such thing as death, and there's no heaven and there's no hell. There is the mind program of the Matrix, which you can get entrapped into this cycle. But if you don't believe in that type of stuff, then you're essentially a free being that is free to come and go as you please. In it, I discussed about spirituality and the soul. What I've come to discover is that because we are all an expression of the same infinite consciousness or the same energy source, each one of us, it's not possible that each one of us could have an individual soul, because we are the one become the whole and the whole become the one. So we're just essentially an expression of that infinite consciousness. We are not an individual. So if we had an individual soul, then that would mean that we are an individual consciousness in its own right, when we're actually not. We're just an expression of the infinite consciousness, everything that there ever was, ever it will be. and ever has been is what we are. So at the end, the consciousness is the God, and we're just an expression of that God, just that focus of attention. Imagine like a magnifying glass, and you're focusing in on something, and then you focus in on something different. That's what we are. Like I am an expression of you, and you are an expression of me. An animal is an expression of you. You are an animal, or you are an expression of that animal. At the end, we're all the expression of the same source energy. So it's not possible for us to have individual souls. Kind of what
the way I look at it is that ultimately in the end we strive back to that and ascend back to that, but ultimately in the beginning we are connected to the one, but we are individual souls because we have the memory that we are connected to the one taken from us. So we don't have that memory here, and that's why we ponder this question and try and figure this out. As we ascend through life, it's a paradox. As we ascend through life, if you learn the things that you're supposed to learn, you become more and more aware of the universe. Your consciousness lifts. You become more and more aware because at the appropriate time, here it goes back to what Neil was talking about, more enlightenment is given to you, more things are given to you, even as a whole collective. Then we move forward, we move up to a different level, we learn new things, and eventually we start losing and this is where I get to what Omar's talking about, we start losing our oneness, an individuality, and we start thinking with a hive mind, and we start moving towards each other and stop thinking as we move up. Eventually we forget about the self, and we start to ascend and become back to the one. But the only reason that we're separated in any way is because the one true creator is trying. This is a game the creator's playing because the creator is alive and the creator created everything. Why? Because the creator wanted to know infinite wisdom. And to know infinite wisdom, you have to have infinite experience. And to have infinite experience, you have to have infinite individuals that are experiencing everything that could possibly be experienced. But the only way that can work is they can't know who they are.
That sounds kind of scary, Leonard.
But it's the truth. It's the truth. It's what's happening. It's the reality. It's just that you don't have to choose to believe that or not. You don't have to. Yeah. You can believe whatever it is that you want to, because in this place, that's what you're here for. You're here to believe whatever it is you want to believe.
But eventually that'll get shaked out of you, right?
Yes, actually.
Eventually your truth, right?
Yes. And all of us do. Eventually, we always will eventually strive to, even if we choose to be evil, eventually that stops, and you have to go back the other way, because the one true God, the creator of the universe, will not have evil in itself.
Well, I kind of agree with David Icke. We're presently living in hell. We're living in a war zone.
Well, and, yeah. If I owned hell and I owned the earth, I would live in hell and rent this place out.
Well,
sorry. I just say that.
It sounds like a bad landlord.
Bad. I see that. That's a half full, half empty thing. David Icke is seeing the glasses half empty. I see the glasses half full, and I look around the world, and yes, you're right, and so is David Icke. I'm not saying he's wrong. He's right that there is this entire planet has a lot of bad on it. But if you focus on looking only at the bad, that's all you're going to see. I did videos that I put up on my Facebook page that I put there on purpose. There's one that says beautiful planet, and I show you in and amongst all of this craziness how much beauty is on this earth. So I choose to look at the beauty and try to see the beauty in everyone.
Well, it was originally created that way. That's the thing. It's not like it turned evil and then all the beauty's gone away.
Right.
Of course, David Icke says the one big goal, the one big escape mechanism is love.
Absolutely. Einstein said, I don't know how all of this stuff works. He says, I know the math and all of that, but one thing I do know is that the universe was created out of love. That's the logos. Logos means love. That's love, the word. What is the word?
Well, then,
Neil, what is the word?
That gets back to what Neil was pointing out.
Love. The word is creation. Logos. That word is love. And that's
so that gets back to what Neil was saying, that the word is love.
Well, and that's what I'm saying right now. Exactly. The word is love. What was the word that created the universe? The word is love. The Catholics stole that and said that Jesus was the word and created the Holy Trinity. Okay. that Jesus was with God and Jesus is the Word, therefore Jesus is God, therefore the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's how that got corrupted. Okay, but I agree with what Neil was saying because that's the truth. The Word was there. What was the Word? The Word is love. The Word is creation.
You
That's
guys
the
agree
logos.
with that?
That's creation.
I think that the word was infinite potential and possibility, which in essence is love and compassion for expression. You know, like
However you want to call it. We could say, I think the word was blue and change blue to mean that. You know what I mean? Yeah, it really, whatever you feel.
It's really unconditional love without any expectations, without any restrictions, without any restrictions. It's pure unconditional love. It's not even, because when you say love, you talk about it in this dimensional reality, but you're meaning a love that we can't even really fathom.
The one reason, and Ike pointed this out, that we can't do that, I guess there's a number of reasons, is that we live in fear.
Yeah, perpetual fear.
Well, no, because we kind of need that perpetual fear to move forward. If there was nothing chasing you, you wouldn't run. So you wouldn't learn anything if there was no reason to learn it. If you knew that you were part of the creator and that eventually, like Omar said, we're just going to send back to that, then you're going to go, why do I have to do anything then? I can just chill, man. I know that I'm going there. My soul's saved. I'm God. There's no reason for me to do anything. I'm going to sit down and have some French fries.
That's kind of how I approach things, Leo. That's how actually I do see it.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I agree with you. Only you're not supposed to know that. Most people aren't supposed to know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are far from arriving at this realization.
Oh, yes, most of the planet. That's why I'm here. Most of the planet is stuck. And that was done on purpose by the powers that should not be. And they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years on this planet.
Yeah.
You know, my philosophy in life has been is that my natural form is of energy. You know, that's my natural form. Yep. And when I created this avatar, that this vehicle that I'm using right now, it's more like I came here for a vacation, because in my natural state, I'm energy. So when I come into this physical form, it's kind of like taking a vacation where, you have the sense of smell, the sense of taste, touch, the five senses, right? So for me, this is kind of like a vacation from myself, where I can come into a physical form and enjoy the foods of the world, enjoy the drinks of the world, the smells, like smell the roses, go for a swim, that kind of deal. So, in my mind, what it tells me is that this physical form is a vacation from myself, because myself in its natural form is an energy, right? And then from that energy, I can't go and eat an apple, or, I can't go and have a beer, or I can't have sex. But, when I take this physical form, I'm able to enjoy those physical senses. And then once this journey is over, once this human experience is over, then, I incorporate back in with the infinite consciousness by, altogether sidestepping, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, eighth, and the ninth dimensions, and and then just go straight to the source. And that's kind of where I am. But of course, my research is ongoing, and I'm always open to the ideas. But so far, that's kind of what I've extrapolated, and to me, it makes more sense. But as more information comes, I have ways to change that. That mindset or that theory, right?
I would change the word vacation to journey, because when you get 76, which I almost am, you're going to look back and say, what hell of a vacation was this?
Right.
It's actually, that's a really great point, sir, because my philosophy, what it is that, I've chosen this body computer avatar exactly how it looks and exactly how it is. And the experiences that I've experienced so far here on my journey, or my human experience, it's exactly what I wanted to experience. Whether it be bad, whether it be good, I've chosen those experiences for myself, because this is the journey that I wanted to have. This is what I wanted to experience, right? So, that's, it kind of falls into what I was just saying earlier as well, right? Where, once the focus of attention is shifted from this physical avatar back to the infinite consciousness, then, the vacation's over, the journey is over, because, you've You've
The only
experienced
thing, there's
what you
been a
can.
lot of experiences in my life that I prefer not to have had. My life would have been a lot more beneficial, but I didn't have that much control over it. When you look back, how much control do you have over your choices? It's amazing how many choices you had to make, even if poorly, you know. Yeah, I wish I could have been farmed out to another family. I wish I could have been had a sterling younger life, not so many beatings and abuses. But some of that seems to be beyond my choice, either because I wasn't thinking clearly, but as a teenager, ever think clearly,
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, when it comes to our physical human experience, I believe that we choose the people that we want to be born to, so that we can have the experiences via that channel, that outlet. Like, let's say if I was born a son to you, then my life experience or my human experience would have been different compared to the life experience, human experience that I've had so far. So for me, what I'm thinking is that the human experience that I've chosen and everything that's happened to me, including the beatings, the prison, being homeless, living in a car, living on the street, anything like that, I think that those are the experiences that we have chosen for ourselves, because that's what we want to experience.
Well, you know what I tell people, and you're absolutely right with what you just said. What I tell people is that everything that you can imagine experiencing, you will or have.
Yeah.
At some point, not just in this life, because there's not enough time. If there were enough time to get it done in one lifetime, we would have one lifetime, and then we would go back to the source and it would be done. You can't possibly do that because there's an infinite. Now, that word in itself tells you that means there is no end. There is an infinite possibility of things that happen. So what you have to understand, Steve, is that you're in a place where the creator put us here, and there's a big population of us, almost 8 billion of us here, right? And all of us change the course of each other's lives with everything that we do, every interaction, every thought, every conversation like we're having now. And if you're the energy that I portray onto you, that you portray onto me, we know that there's an exchange of energy between a band that's up singing and playing on stage and the audience. That's an actual exchange of energy, okay, with the people. So we know that actually happens. So we affect each other in a way that is literally, if you take a calm lake and you have rain come down, each drop of rain would be one person, and you expand out, and you actually literally, everything you do goes outward in all directions and affects everyone that it touches, and everything they do changes and moves everything in a bunch of other directions. So the reason for that is so that the one creator, us, all of us as a collective, will eventually experience everything. So everything that happens in your life and everything that happened in Omar's life and what happened to me and what happened to Neil, all of us have a grouping of things that we all experienced in this lifetime. But then there's individual things that we didn't experience, like I have never been in prison, okay? I have been incarcerated, but I have never been in prison. But I have relatives that have, okay? Omar has been in prison. I have been tortured and beaten. You have been tortured and beaten, and I'm pretty sure that Omar probably had. I don't know about Neil because we never talked about that, but I'll bet he's been abused. So there's a certain number of things that we all go through separately, and then there's a certain number of things that you look at, and I've never had anything like that happen to me in my entire life. But how many lifetimes have you occupied?
Okay, just to stop you there for a sec, Leo.
I was actually done right that second.
Yeah, right on. Neil's got a bail, so Neil, thank you very much, brother. I really appreciate your knowledge that you've been sharing with us here this afternoon, and I'm really looking forward to the August 9th presentation. Or is August 6th or August 9th?
August 9th.
And don't forget, guys, if you want to see a little bit more of Neil next Friday, and go to Orion Rising on YouTube. I'll have the memes up in the clicks. You'll see Neil there again talking.
Can I make a quick announcement here?
Just one second, sir, because Neil's got a cruise here.
Okay.
I just want to give Neil an opportunity to give out some closing words that he wants, and then from there we can carry on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, brother, for having me here. I'm really happy to be a part of it. Right now, content is king. We got to just keep pushing out the content. A lot of this information and wisdom is out there. It's easy to find. And if you find yourself spending more time at home right now, or even just have some time to dedicate to this is a great opportunity to be informed, because you can move forward into this new world that is emerging, the non-normal new world that is coming out of this with a better foundation in this wisdom, our ancient history, our connection to the cosmos, spiritual tools that can help empower you, whether it's sound and vibration, meditation techniques. We really need to, cultivate this and fuel our own souls. When it comes to ancient history, I am really hopeful that very soon this wisdom is going to come out to the masses. The alternative/forbidden archaeology is going to come out. There's been many whistleblowers saying that it's just a matter of time now. And the documentaries information is there. It's not like it's hard to find at this moment. So pretty soon, through presentations like this and many other people that I work with, and you guys that are panelists with me here today, we're just going to keep putting it out there until people really start realizing the origin of humanity and the connection of it, how deep it goes, and the fact that we're probably not the most advanced civilization that ever existed on this planet. There could have been even greater civilizations, way more advanced, technologically advanced, with ability to travel to space. All these are truths that seem to now be emerging and could be a possibility. So I'm extremely excited for what's to come. I appreciate all of you. If you want to find out more about me, go to portaltoascension.org. About page there is about Portal to Ascension. But the best thing to do is go to our website, portaltoascension.org, sign up. You get a username and password for our website. Our website pretty much runs like Netflix for conscious presentations. We have over 10,000 hours of presentations. You can sort by speaker, category, thumbnail, add to your watch list, continue watching later. Extremely robust platform for all this awareness. So go to portaltoascension.org and you can check me out there. And my presentation on this will be on August 9th. So if you want to attend the actual full presentation, which will be 3 hours long with unlimited replay access, you can go to portaltoascension.org, online events, and sign up there. And when I come onto Orion Rising on the 26th, I'm going to be doing another presentation. It's going to be different. And that one's going to be on 2018 and 2019 archaeological discoveries, because what has happened is we got so consumed and lost into this world of, like, especially now of COVID, people aren't talking about these new discoveries that we found. So I want to spend, maybe a good hour talking about new discoveries that are basically throwing off the conventional timeline, and something new is emerging from it. So appreciate you all very much. Love you all. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, brothers. I'll see you guys later.
And also, Neil, before you take off, I was watching your podcast the other day on Werewolf Radio, and you have some kind of a program running for your Portal to Ascension. If people can't afford, they can come back and they can pay you later, or pay you a little bit, or give you a donation, or something like that. I really love that. So, I appreciate it if you can give that out too.
Definitely. So what I started doing 2 months ago, because of this whole world situation, is that many people, they can't afford to attend events, but right now that shouldn't be a barrier between you learning this new relevant information, some ancient, some new disclosure information. So on our website, I have made it that for the whole year, first it was just for 2 months, but now it's for the rest of the year, that we have a no one turned away policy. So not only can you attend for regular price to be a part of the event, you get 1,000+ hours of free footage on top of your ticket price. You get to access it, unlimited replay access. But if you can't afford, you can donate any amount you want, from 1 cent to whatever. And if you can't afford it at all, you can come for free. Just send us an email from the contact us page on portaltoascension.org. Or you could even donate and pay it forward for someone else to attend for free. So every option is possible. Right now, we don't want to hold any information from everybody. Everybody deserves to have this information. And your monetary state, especially because many people have been, put out of work and can't even afford basic things right now, that shouldn't be a barrier to you getting this information. And we're at a place now with Portal to Ascension that we're able to offer it for donation and free as well. And you should definitely come and be a part of it. We have an event pretty much every single week. I have 3 events this weekend alone. I just did 1 today. I have 2 tomorrow. And then we have Ascension, Exopolitics, and Disclosure online conference next week with 4 speakers there too. So there's a lot to choose from. Pretty much anything from tomorrow, the energy of animals and human connection, to advanced aerospace black ops projects and UAP devices, UAP disclosure, and all the way to sacred sexuality, and even to ancient civilization. So there's a lot of information to choose from. Go to portaltoascension.org. It's right there at the bottom of the screen, and check it out.